This is live from New Delhi. You're watching a special broadcast India at BRICS on DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Well, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Kazan earlier today to attend the 16th BRICS Summit. Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to meet President Putin on the sidelines in a while from now. We will be keeping an eye on that meeting, all-important meeting rather, besides talk about what India brings to the table, the significance of it at the BRICS Forum and the overarching agenda given the timings of the BRICS Summit this year. We will be joined by a panel from India and Russia on this very special broadcast on DD India. But let's begin. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Kazan on a two-day visit to Russia for the BRICS Summit. Prime Minister Modi was earlier today warmly received by the head of the Republic of Tatarstan, Rustam Minikhanov. Under the chairmanship of Russia, the summit is themed on strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security. This is the first summit of the grouping after it was expanded in Johannesburg last year. The BRIC as a formal grouping started after the meeting of the leaders of Russia, India and China in St. Petersburg way back in 2006. Remember, it was agreed to expand BRIC, B-R-I-C, into BRICS with the inclusion of South Africa in 2010. In fact, last year's expansion was the first such exercise since 2010. The new members of the BRICS this time around include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, United Arab Emirates. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi was also received very warmly upon his arrival at Hotel Korston in Russia's Kazan. Prime Minister Modi also met members of the Indian community who gathered at the hotel to greet him. This is Prime Minister Modi's second visit to Russia this year. He travelled to Moscow in July to attend the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit, where he also held a bilateral meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Earlier in the departure statement, the Indian Prime Minister said, and I quote, that India values close cooperation within BRICS, which has emerged as an important platform for dialogue and discussion on a range of key issues concerning global development agenda. The Prime Minister noted that the expansion of BRICS with the addition of the new members last year has added to its inclusivity and agenda for the global good. Prime Minister Modi said his visit to Kazan will further reinforce the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. The Prime Minister said that he was looking forward to meeting other leaders from the BRICS as well. Let's go live across to Kazan from where DD India's Jessica Taneja joins us with more details. Jessica, you have been reporting extensively from Kazan there, but today as we speak, all eyes are going to be set upon the meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. Outline for our viewers the significance as the two leaders meet. This is the second meeting face-to-face in almost 3 months between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi.
That's correct, Sakal. You'd recall back in July as well, Prime Minister Modi had made his first bilateral visit to Russia, and later on, there were a lot of deals and pacts signed as well, particularly diversifying beyond energy and defense. So you saw a lot of collaborations in the past as well. But talking about the meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in the evening, you can expect a few more outcomes, although we will await as to what the discussion was about with the president in the evening. But as you see, BRICS as a forum offers a unique opportunity for all its members to engage, particularly on various different issues. But if you talk about the meeting with President Putin in the evening, it would certainly focus on many other initiatives, and also taking stock of what was decided and discussed in the last meeting as well. There is also possible talks of cooperation in the Northern Sea route. There was an India-Russia working group that had concluded right before his visit, and it had highlighted about India and Russia collaboration about Russia and India's strategic partnership, and also how they could potentially collaborate when it comes to the resource-rich Arctic region. And with Russia's cooperation, of course, many other deals that have been signed would also be looked into, but you could expect something to that extent when we talk about the Northern Sea route, where the cargo shipment as well as the transit and many other initiatives that the two would plan. Of course, we'll know the details much later, but at this point, this seems to be quite important. And on the other hand, when you see the meeting happening between the Russian President and Prime Minister Modi in the evening, of course, there has been a relationship that has existed for many, many years. So expect some outcomes in the evening, but we'll know that later.
Okay. Overall, the overarching agenda as far as this year's BRICS is concerned under chairmanship of Russia, which, the timings of it also has added another dimension to the entire BRICS summit. Jessica, if you could just talk about the broader agenda this time around with the inclusion of new members as well.
That's correct. Earlier in the year, you recall that new members had joined the BRICS grouping, giving it more strategic importance, as many would look at it as an anti-Western front. But for India, that is not the case. You'd recall that India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, had pointed out that India is not anti-Western, it's non-Western, and continues to engage with various other nations, as it falls under India's strategic foreign policy, which is strategic autonomy. So given that, you could expect a lot of different bilateral meetings where the Prime Minister would hold later in the evening, tomorrow, when he will be present at the Kazan Expo, where the BRICS Summit will take place. But with the expansion, Sakal, it's important to point out the number of countries showing interest in BRICS. Because if you look at the current financial order, many countries, especially of the global south, feel that they're still not included. They've suffered from the impact of COVID. They've suffered from the impact of conflicts in both West Asia and, of course, the Eurasian region. And especially when it comes to a financial, structure that was set up by the West, particularly something that many countries who are interested in joining BRICS would look for an alternative, not completely moving away from the existing structure, but having an alternative as well, where they could engage with many other countries apart from the West.
Okay. Having said that, for the optics, India is also seen as a very important bridge between the global north and global south and rest of the world, where India takes the leadership. Jessica?
That's correct. At the heart of India's foreign policy is also South-South cooperation, and you'd see on how that plays out at the BRICS forum as well. Remember in 2006 when it was BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa joined about a year later. Since its inception, it has been trying to make space for a separate grouping which could not be a counter to the G7, but if you look at the contribution of G7 to the global GDP, that would account for nearly 30%. And if you look at the contribution to the global GDP by the BRICS nations, that would account for 35.9%, and that's relatively that's 6% more than what you'd expect. So, of course, the importance that comes with the BRICS nations is out there to see, with many countries, as I said, expressing interest because the current structure, the Western architecture that has exposed certain intricacies and also voids, sometimes dangerously weaponized for some countries. But for India, it's important to understand that the strategic depth, that engagement with countries, apart from its other multilateral initiatives, BRICS has remained participation in BRICS has remained consistent with India's participation, and the future looks pretty similar, Sakal.
So we can say BRICS reflects India's interest as much as India would reflect BRICS' interest. Jessica, before we leave you, a bit more about such a warm welcome accorded to Prime Minister Modi at the hotel, not only by the Indian diaspora, but we could figure out there were some Russian nationals there as well. And a bit more on the itinerary on day one of Prime Minister.
Right, he was here at Kazan just about a while ago while we showed those visuals live on television. He met the Russians here from the Tatar community, which is 56% of the population here in Kazan. Very excited to meet the Prime Minister. They offered him sweets as well upon his arrival when he landed in Russia. And of course here there were dance performances. An electrifying atmosphere was visible with many people from the diaspora present here. Also more than 500 Indian students, medical students, pardon me, are studying in the Kazan Medical University as well as the Kazan Federal University for other courses as well. So it's important to see and how the diaspora really feels about Prime Minister's visit. We saw that in July as well, and the similar atmosphere was offered here in Kazan, as it is every time when the Prime Minister arrives with much fanfare. Talking about his itinerary moving forward, you could expect about in a few hours he will meet with the Russian president, as I pointed out earlier. That engagement, that is, of course, later in the evening, more engagements can be expected. But the Prime Minister would be at the BRICS Expo tomorrow and not today, as we're told.
Okay, we'll leave it there as of now. Many thanks, Jessica Taneja, joining us live from Kazan in Russia for DD India special broadcast. Thank you. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Kazan is important, as Jessica also pointed out in her reports and in her live, for both BRICS Summit as well as to strengthen bilateral relations with Russia. Jessica of DD India also had this exclusive conversation with India's ambassador to Russia, Vinay Kumar, for an update. Let's listen.
The much anticipated BRICS Summit is taking place here in Kazan in Russia. We have with us India's ambassador to Russia, Mr. Vinay Kumar. Thank you, sir, for speaking to DD India and taking out time for us. What are the broad agendas that we're looking at, particularly in this summit?
BRICS, as you know, is a grouping for economic cooperation. And as a founding member of BRICS, India is very deeply committed to the agenda of economic cooperation among the BRICS countries. In the forthcoming summit, all the issues that BRICS have been talking about in terms of economic cooperation, trade settlement through national currencies, cooperation for environment, sustainable development and climate change, promoting the economic developmental aspirations of Global South, reforms of the global institutions to better reflect today's realities. All these issues are on the agenda that the leaders will discuss and decide.
Now that we have more members joining BRICS, it's now BRICS Plus officially. With the expansion of BRICS, how do you see the new countries that are joining in? What is it that they bring to the table, and how does it help build that economic cooperation, so to say, within the BRICS membership?
Increase in BRICS membership from 5 to 10 and interest of so many more countries to join BRICS. It only underlines that the BRICS agenda is popular and a number of countries want to become part of it. It helps in furthering economic cooperation among these countries, and also this promotes multi-polarity, that is one of the very important objectives of India in the global arena.
Let me quickly welcome Ambassador S.R. Tayal, former senior diplomat in our DD India studios here in National Capital, New Delhi, on the special broadcast. And I also welcome Fred Weir, senior journalist and author. Hello, sir. Joining us live from Moscow. Fred, thank you so much to see you on the show. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to welcome R.K. Bishnoi, Chairman, BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joining us live from Rishikesh in India. Gentlemen, thank you, all of you. Ambassador Tayal, I would like to start with you now. Within 3 months, second meeting, face-to-face, President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, but this time under the BRICS setting with new members, and the timings of it also makes the summit crucial. What is expected when the two leaders meet in a short while from now?
I think this time when the two leaders meet this evening, agenda will perhaps be more on multilateral issues, more on global issues, particularly economic issues, and on BRICS, the future of BRICS, the future direction of BRICS. The issue of more membership in BRICS is a very important issue.
Okay.
And the expansion. And many analysts feel that last time when in Johannesburg, the new members were added, there were 5 members and 6 new members were taken. Argentina did not join. So perhaps things were rushed a little bit. And India has been holding the view that there should be some proper criteria, because more than 30 countries have expressed an interest in joining BRICS. So I think that will be one issue on which more clarity is required among members, and perhaps that will be discussed. And then the 3 issues which have been identified by our Foreign Secretary yesterday, of course, is the multipolarity, that this establishes the principle of multipolarity in the world, both on economic and strategic issues. Number 2, how to reform the global governance. That is also very important, because Security Council is paralyzed. We have seen that 2 major conflicts are going on. In one, Russia itself is involved.
That's what makes it interesting. And is it a little precarious for Russia?
It is, but ultimately in BRICS agenda is economic. If we go back to the history of BRICS, in 2001 when the Goldman Sachs analyst had coined this phrase, it was the fastest growing emerging economies. Then when BRICS actually was formed 2000, then the global economic crisis came, and the group became kind of a pressure group within G20, because in G20 the G7 used to make its own agenda. They used to meet before the westernized rich countries, and the other countries were left to bat on their own, singly, individually.
So precisely the new multilateral institutions which were born out of BRICS, like your NDB and CRA, we will talk about that as well. Let me quickly go across to other panelists and have their opening remarks. Fred Weir, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. We'd like to understand from you, what's the kind of significance that Moscow, or the chair of this year's BRICS Summit, attaches to what India brings to the table. President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are going to have this meeting in a while from now on the sidelines. India is as important for the BRICS, and BRICS is as important for India. Your thoughts?
Well, the first most immediate and obvious thing for Russia is, of course, that this meeting, it's a huge, impressive meeting, is a demonstration to the world and to the West in particular that Russia is not isolated.
Okay.
You can't underestimate how important that is in Moscow. But beyond that, Russia, having been completely alienated from the West and from partners, economic and even political partners that it had until a decade or so ago and had put their stakes on, now is going full tilt for an alternative world order. And they want things like economic relations, financial dealings that are sanctions proof for obvious reasons. Now this puts Russia out ahead of a country like India, which has a multi-vectored foreign policy. It has very important relations, even security associations with the United States, and it doesn't want to give those up. It wants to develop a world order that's inclusive, more just for everybody, and it will go along with Russia up to a certain point, because I think a lot of what Russia wants is probably in the interests of most of the global South. But Russia is in a hurry and has a lot of immediate needs, and it will be pushing that. I think the Russian diplomacy is very skillful, and they know their partners, and they're awfully good at handling these situations. But they have urgent needs, and I'm thinking that a country like India, especially, can push back a little bit with Russia on finding peace in Ukraine.
Okay.
This is a big issue. It's sitting there. It's the elephant in the room, and it is, in the long run, it is a huge obstacle to developing the world order that everybody there in Kazan wants right now, is anxious to start building. But that war has to end, and it has to end in some kind of a legal and permanent way. And so I'm guessing, I don't know, subtext in some of these bilateral meetings might be a bit about that.
Okay, let me take your thoughts to Mr. Bishnoi. Sir, your thoughts now, considering India is one of the founding members of the BRICS, and this whole narrative or a template of India being the leader of the global South, and here I would talk about bridging the North-South and rest of the Western theatre. How do you see that?
Yeah, in fact, this event, what is coming up in Kazan, it may be seen as an event to recast the international financial dynamics. And this particular event would also aim to rebalance the influence of the Western countries in the global governance. Now, as far as India is concerned, of course, we have been, over the years, we have been, pushing the agenda of the global South, and we have been leading this particular movement with great emphasis. And every time in the BRICS event, India has been at the forefront whenever such kind of issues of the common ground have arisen in the BRICS platform. So what is now required is that we look for some more opportunities together as far as economic cooperation is concerned, and India is in the best position to get the maximum out of this platform as far as the increased economic cooperation with the fellow nations is concerned, or the strategic partnership is concerned, because today we have made our position like that, but there are several issues which have been either resolved or very close to resolution. So this BRICS platform to India is definitely a very significant opportunity.
Right.
And global South is concerned, of course, we are the one who would be leading the movement and showing the world that this is kind of a expression of the global multipolarity, and this remains the expression of the global multipolarity as well.
And Fred, your thoughts now. Global multipolarity, where BRICS, reflects India's interests. We've been talking about the reforms at the WTO, multilateral forums like WTO and United Nations and United Nations Security Council. But this is something, the whole just world order, something is that coincides with this year's theme as well. At the time when Russia itself is engaged with the offensive with Ukraine and the rest of the world, the whole offensive under the chairmanship of Russia. Do you think these issues are going to come up? This is going to be a difficult but an important part of the conversation?
Well, yes, I certainly think so. What we're experiencing now is a rather, not just rapid, but almost explosive growth of BRICS. The size of the delegations there in Kazan, and interested countries, dozens, at least 24 countries that are interested in joining. This is really, it's hard to overestimate how important this is as a watershed in world affairs. But the impression of this growth is one thing, and the ability to find the ways to articulate it, to make it work, to bring all these diverse and very diverse countries into some kind of an association that puts them all in harness to accomplish certain goals. That's a huge work in progress, and I'm sure we're going to see that unfolding. And in the longer run, of course, it is about changing the nature of global governance, to make the UN Security Council work for the larger global community, because it doesn't, it doesn't. And other global institutions, obviously, for multipolarity to become mature, to work, the West has to reconcile itself with some new state of affairs. I don't know how likely that is. I was reading the New York Times coverage this morning, and I found that they're not dismissive or scornful of the BRICS. It's quite good factual coverage. They do put a lot of emphasis on the diversity and the problems and the obstacles. But this is new, and really, if we're going to get a new world order that works for everybody.
Fred, very quickly now, in this world order, where do you see India's voice? India standing tall and high on the, global table, in the sense how India has managed to use strategically the multilateral institutions which it has been backing, the just world order, to strengthen its global standing, especially in the last decade under the Prime Ministership of Narendra Modi.
Well, yes, of course. India is one of the big emerging factors in world affairs. And of course, global institutions, as they're now formulated, don't give India, countries like India, the full ability to express their strength. But yeah, I think you can look at the map and you can see that there are emerging centers of global power that are greatly underrepresented in world organizations, and also underestimated by the West, and still treated as like not quite fully developed countries. This is all going to change, and I think that India is one of the rising stars of the new world.
Yeah, India, the rising star of the world, coming from Fred Ware, who has covered Russia for leading national dailies here in India, and he continues to write for global dailies. Fred, we need to, in fact, continue this discussion. Before that, Mr. Bishnoi and Ambassador Thea, let's quickly dip into some more stories before we go back to this important discussion. In fact, Prime Minister Modi is in Kazan, as we know, for the BRICS 2024. And as reiterated by our panelists, that India has played a very, very vital role as a member of the BRICS, one of the founding members of the BRICS, that India has been. India brings great value to BRICS in shaping the BRICS architecture, efforts in areas such as economic growth, sustainable development and global governance reforms. In fact, BRICS as a grouping reflects India's interests, including reforms in the multilateral forums, that's what we talked about, like the International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization or WTO, United Nations and UN Security Council. In fact, in recent years, India used these multilateral institutions to strengthen or consolidate its global position by pioneering the inclusion of African Union also during its G20 presidency. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Cairo in June 2023 was the first of its kind since 1997 and revived India's strategic partnerships with the new members as well. In fact, India's position on the issues like BRICS, expansion and de-dollarization can have a direct bearing on the decisions of other members as well. We are going to speak about that as well with our panels also. And BRIC as a formal grouping started after the meeting of the leaders of Russia, India and China in St. Petersburg in 2006. Just to give you a little bit of historical perspective, how BRICS came into being. It was agreed to expand BRIC, B-R-I-C, into BRICS with the inclusion of South Africa, which happened in 2010. Now, it is one of the most important intergovernmental organizations which centers around the notions of multipolarity, demanding for decentralization of multilateral organizations and mutual cooperation. Let's take a look at the whole journey of BRICS so far in this report.
The leaders of BRIC countries met for the first time in St. Petersburg in Russia on the margins of G8 Outreach Summit in July 2006. After a series of high-level meetings, the first BRIC summit was held in Ekaterinburg, Russia on 16th June 2009. In September 2010, BRIC Group was renamed as BRICS after South Africa was accepted as a full member at the BRIC Foreign Ministers' meeting in New York. Accordingly, South Africa attended the third BRIC summit in Sanya City in China on 14th April 2011. A further expansion of BRICS took place in 2024 with 5 new members, which includes Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. However, Saudi Arabia is yet to fully participate in the group's
visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS Summit. We're going to play those shots for you just in a while. But remember, one of the important engagements of Prime Minister Modi upon landing in Kazan today to participate in the 16th BRICS Summit under the chairmanship of Russia, where first important or all important meeting, besides the other bilaterals that are scheduled for day one, has been the meeting of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin.
Я с теплотой вспоминаю ваш июльский визит в Москву и плодотворные переговоры с вами. Мы регулярно обмениваемся информацией по телефону. Признателен, что вы откликнулись на наше приглашение и лично приехали в Казань на саммит БРИКС. Сегодня мы вместе примем участие в церемонии открытия саммита. Затем предстоит общение лидеров за ужином. И таким образом мы начнем уже нашу работу. В Казани мы должны принять целый ряд важных решений, направленных на дальнейшее совершенствование деятельности объединения и укрепление в Казань на саммит БРИКС. Сегодня мы вместе примем участие в церемонии открытия саммита. Затем предстоит общение лидеров за ужином. И таким образом мы начнем уже нашу работу. В Казани мы должны принять целый ряд важных решений, направленных на дальнейшее совершенствование деятельности объединения и укрепление в Казань на саммит БРИКС. Сегодня мы вместе примем участие в церемонии открытия саммита. Затем предстоит общение лидеров за ужином.
हैं। ये एक ऐतिहासिक बहुत दिलचस्प शहर है जो वोल्गा नदी के किनारे पर स्थित है। मुझे याद है कि हमारे जुलाई की मुलाकात की याद है जब हमारे बहुत अच्छे चर्चा हुई बहुत विषयों पर। इसके बीच हम टेलीफोन पर कई बार हमने बात की। कजान आने का आमंत्रण स्वीकार करने के लिए मैं आपका बहुत आभारी हूँ। तो आज हम ब्रिक्स शिखर सम्मेलन के उद्घाटन सेरेमनी में भाग लेंगे और उसके बाद डिनर के समय हम भी बात करेंगे दूसरे नेताओं के साथ। आज आने वाले ब्रिक्स के दौरान समिट के दौरान हमें कई बहुत महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय पर पूरा करना चाहिए। तो एक बार फिर कज़ान में आपका स्वागत है।
В Казани мы должны принять целый ряд решений по совершенствованию деятельности объединения.
ब्रिक्स की कार्रवाई को सुधारने के लिए हमको कई अहम डिसीजन लेना पड़ेगा।
И очень ценим наше взаимодействие на этом направлении, имея в виду, что наши государства стояли у истоков создания объединения.
हम रूस और भारत के बीच जो सहयोग चल रहा है हम वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मानते हैं। खासतौर पर ये बात मायने रखते हुए कि भारत और रूस ये ब्रिक्स के मूल सदस्य देश है।
Российско-индийские отношения носят характер особо привилегированного стратегического партнерства и продолжают активно развиваться.
रूस और भारत के बीच स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप है और ये रिश्ते बढ़ते जाते हैं।
Укрепляется взаимодействие по линии законодательных органов.
पार्लियामेंट्स के बीच जो संपर्क है वो भी बढ़ते हैं।
Наши министры иностранных дел в постоянном контакте находятся.
हमारे विदेश मंत्री संपर्क में रहते हैं।
В хорошем состоянии находится товарооборот.
हमारे व्यापार भी आगे चलता है।
И очередное заседание межправкомиссии намечено на 12 ноября в Нью-Дели.
और 12 दिसंबर को नई दिल्ली में अंतर सरकारी आयोग की अगली बैठक होने वाली है।
Последовательно развиваются крупные проекты.
हमारी बड़ी परियोजनाएं लगातार विकसित हो रहे हैं।
И мы приветствуем ваше решение открыть в Казани Генеральное консульство Индии.
और जो आपने कजान में भारत का कौंसल जनरल खोलने का निर्णय लिया हम इसका स्वागत करते हैं।
Расширение дипломатического присутствия Индии в России будет способствовать дальнейшему развитию двусторонних отношений.
भारत के कूटनीतिक उपस्थिति से हमारे सहयोग को फायदा मिलेगा।
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, мы очень рады видеть вас и всю вашу представительную команду в России.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, हम आपको और आपकी प्रतिनिधि मंडल रूस में देखने से हमको बड़ी खुशी है।
एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आपकी मित्रता, गर्मजोशी भरे स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। मेरे लिए खुशी की बात है कि ब्रिक्स समिट के लिए कजान जैसे खूबसूरत शहर में आने का अवसर मिला है। इस शहर के साथ भारत के गहरे और ऐतिहासिक संबंध रहे हैं। कजान में भारत के नए कॉन्सुलेट के खुलने से ये संबंध और मजबूत होंगे।
Ваше превосходительство, в первую очередь позвольте от всей души поблагодарить вас за вашу дружбу, за теплое и радушное гостеприимство. Отрадно, что мне посчастливилось, что я приехал в Казань, в такой прекрасный город, для того, чтобы участвовать в саммите БРИКС. Индия имеет глубокие исторические связи с этим городом. И после того, как откроется генконсульство Индии, в этом городе наши отношения еще крепнут.
एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 3 महीनों में मेरा 2 बार रूस आना हमारे करीबी समन्वय और गहरी मित्रता को दर्शाता है। जुलाई में मॉस्को में हुई हमारी एनुअल समिट से हर क्षेत्र में हमारे सहयोग को बल मिला है।
Ваше превосходительство, это мой второй визит в Россию за последние 3 месяца, и это свидетельствует о тесной координации и крепкой дружбе между нашими странами. В июле в Москве, как вы правильно упомянули, мы провели двусторонний саммит, и благодаря нашим дискуссиям наше сотрудничество во всех областях укрепилось.
एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले एक वर्ष में ब्रिक्स की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं आपको बधाई देता हूं। 15 वर्षों में ब्रिक्स ने अपनी एक विशेष पहचान बनाई है और अब विश्व के अनेक देश इससे जुड़ना चाहते हैं। मैं ब्रिक्स समिट में भाग लेने के लिए उत्सुक हूं।
Ваше превосходительство, вы успешно руководите объединением БРИКС с начала года. За это я хотел бы вас поздравить. За последние 15 лет своего существования наше объединение БРИКС создало для себя особую личность. И сегодня многие страны мира хотят присоединиться к нашему объединению. Я с нетерпением жду наших дискуссий в рамках БРИКС завтра.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है। एक्सेलेंसी, आज इन सभी विषयों पर विचार साझा करने का एक और महत्वपूर्ण अवसर है। एक बार फिर बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Ваше превосходительство, по поводу продолжающегося конфликта между Россией и Украиной мы регулярно находимся в контакте. Как я сказал и раньше, мы считаем, что проблемы должны решаться мирными способами, и мы полностью поддерживаем скорейшее установление мира и стабильности. Во всех наших усилиях мы даем приоритетное значение человечеству, и мы готовы оказать любое возможное содействие и в будущем. Ваше превосходительство, сегодня у нас будет возможность поговорить по всем этим вопросам. Еще раз хотел бы вас поблагодарить.
Спасибо.
All right, opening remarks from both sides. Indian side led, or the Indian delegation led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the Russian delegation led by President Putin. I'm just quickly going to summarize the big talking points delivered by the Prime Minister in his opening statement. Prime Minister Modi expressed at the very outset he's grateful for such an invitation and for a visit to Russia. And he also recalled that this is the second meeting, in-person meeting in the last 3 months, his meeting with President Putin, and he said he is very happy and grateful for such a warm welcome accorded by the Russian side, and he's very happy to be there in Kazan. And he also mentioned that the India-Russia ties have only consolidated further in the last few years, and we are going to have these visuals of Prime Minister Modi's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, which just concluded a while back, and we had the opening statements. We are talking about the opening statements from both sides. There you have Russian President Vladimir Putin warmly greeting India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on day one of the BRICS Summit, the 16th edition of the BRICS Summit, where Prime Minister Modi talked about the last 3 months, how two leaders have met twice, and how the ties between Moscow and New Delhi have only energized further. Prime Minister talked about, Prime Minister Modi also congratulated Russia upon being the BRICS chair this time around. And Prime Minister Modi did mention that he's very eager to participate in the BRICS Summit under the chairmanship of Russian Federation. Well, one of the significant aspects of Prime Minister Modi's opening remarks today being how India, again, Ambassador Tayal, I would just like to have your point here, pitching in for dialogue, discourse, for a peaceful resolution of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I think that was one of the main takeaways of Prime Minister's brief, opening remarks there, where, again, Prime Minister Modi batted for dialogue and peaceful resolution. And he also did mention that India is there. I mean, India is happy to extend any sort of assistance when it comes to resolving the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Your thoughts?
See, these are public remarks because the preliminary remarks, they were televised. So what Prime Minister has said earlier also, that this is not an era of war. And he is continuing that theme that
India reiterated its position
the
on the
dispute should be settled peacefully.
Yeah.
And then he said that India is always on the side of peace and stability, and India is ready to play a role, if that is required. So I think when we all know that after July meeting with President Putin, Prime Minister had also gone to Ukraine. And with President Zelensky also, he gave the similar message that when the time is right, when you are ready, India will be ready to play a role.
There was a message here also.
The message here also, absolutely. So, but this is a long-term exercise. I don't think from BRICS Summit today any clear direction could emerge. But there could be discussions, informal discussions.
Yes, we go to them, yes.
Yes.
As far as President Putin's remarks are concerned, can we please have Fred Ware on screen, please? Fred, I'm sure you heard President Putin. He started by recalling his meeting with Prime Minister Modi in July at the Russia-India Annual Summit, where he said that the two leaders have had telephonic conversations as well, number of telephonic conversations, and he's very grateful for Prime Minister Modi for accepting this invite. And well, two things that I want your reactions on, that when President Putin spoke about the important issues that are going to come up in the summit with Prime Minister Modi, though there was no mention of Russia-Ukraine conflict as far as President Putin's opening remarks were concerned, but he did mention, Fred, that Russia attaches immense significance to India-Russia ties, mentioning further that foreign ministers are in constant touch, mentioning further that the trade ties have been very impressive, robust rather, and he did talk about the intergovernmental meeting between India and Russia that is scheduled for December, sometime in December, that is 12th December, and big partnerships that are on the anvil. What do you make of the brief messaging by the Russian side?
Well, certainly the economic side is incredibly important because that relationship has exploded during the period of this unfortunate war. And it's probably not going to change significantly afterwards. There is a huge new amount of trade, India buying Russian energy, and Russia needs to turn that into sort of constructive investment in India or purchase of Indian goods to balance that out. That's an urgent problem. As for the Ukrainian war, I think Putin said in the Far Eastern Conference a month ago that he was open to mediation by countries like India, Brazil, China. He made that point very clearly. And so I suspect things are happening under the carpet, not for public discussion right now, but I think we're closer now than people imagine to some sort of negotiations, mediation that might occur. And it's perfectly clear that the West isn't going to play a role in that. You can just see the impasse that has developed between Kiev and the West over Zelensky's supposed peace plan, which is really an ultimatum to the West to give Ukraine NATO membership. Well, that's not going to happen, and it doesn't seem like any other constructive signals are coming from the West that might lead to, some kind of productive talks. So, if you're going to do it, the countries of good faith like India, which has been consistent on the principles, that there has to be a peaceful settlement and it has to be according to the UN Charter, and I mean, it's probably not going to turn out exactly according to the UN Charter, but compromises might be made. People might move their positions and some kind of settlement might come out of it. But who is going to provide the impetus? Well, it's countries like India.
Okay, all right. Mr. Vishnu, your thoughts on the opening remarks? Okay, we go back to him in a bit, but Ambassador Tyal, now does this set the tone for the future, the nature of the things to come in near future as far as India-Russia is concerned? But well, anyway, we will not talk about the Russia-Ukraine because that's not the main element here in this edition of BRICS Summit. But overall messaging as far as the opening remarks from both sides are concerned. I would like to hear your views on
In opening remarks, President Putin also said that India and Russia are the founding members of BRICS.
Yes, he began by saying.
Many analysts are saying that BRICS is losing focus. And so many members want to join because earlier they were the large and growing economies. Now Iran and Russia are under sanctions. Brazil is having a lot of economic difficulties. In fact, in the original 4 or 5 members, India is the only country where the economy is growing very rapidly. 7 to 8% per year. We are already 5th largest and maybe 3rd largest after some time. So what will be the agenda of BRICS going forward? I think this needs to be decided because it seems that the attempt is, if we look at the Chinese statement, they say that it is a global south they referred to. But China is not in global south. If you look at their per capita income and their manufacturing capacity.
Since you talked about China, now the meeting on the sidelines with Xi Jinping and the statements, in the light of the statements made by our foreign minister yesterday.
Foreign secretary.
Foreign secretary yesterday, I think makes this also very important. Do you think that will have some sort of resonance?
Very, very important, yes. And it sort of clears the air and makes the environment more conducive to some kind of an interaction between our Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping. But earlier one could have said that it's not going to happen. But now the whole world, India, we are hopeful that maybe there would be some kind of an interaction, if not a formal meeting. And that will be very helpful because the foreign ministers have been talking of the 2 countries, the national security advisors have been talking.
Okay. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. I'm going to quickly go across to my reporter Akshay Dongre, who covers MEA for us, to give us a bit of a perspective as far as the agenda setting from an Indian perspective. Akshay is concerned, what India brings to the table, and with those brief remarks made by our Prime Minister, I think one thing is very clear that maybe President Putin may not want to talk about it in the BRICS Summit, but India once again pitching for dialogue, discourse, peaceful resolution of the Russia-Ukraine. I mean, at least in the opening statement.
Well, thank you so much, Sakal. But first of all, let's talk about what India brings to the table when it comes to BRICS. Well, it is absolutely clear, India being the largest country, a democracy, largest democracy in the world, in fact, the fastest growing major economy in the world. So now we are a faster growing economy than even China. We are growing at a rapid pace, one of the youngest population in the world. So there are a lot of things that India is bringing to the table when it comes to the BRICS grouping. It is one of the most important aspect of BRICS that countries like India and China, that are major economies of the world, are part of it, and that is perhaps the reason why there are several nations that are now trying to get a membership of BRICS. That includes several countries from the global south especially, and the way India has emerged as the leader of the global south, that also has given India a lot of soft power when it comes to the BRICS grouping, because BRICS has always been about the major growing economies, countries that are growing at a rapid pace. So India is one of the most shining beacon when it comes to the BRICS grouping, besides being one of the founding members of the group. Now, the second aspect of it is about the dialogue that you mentioned, Sakal, that President Putin may not want to bring it up, but we have seen from the earlier discussions between the two leaders as well, that President Putin has acted quite maturely when it comes to the resolution of the conflict, and whenever India has initiated these dialogues, Russia has not acted like Ukraine. For example, when Prime Minister Modi had visited Russia in July, we saw a kind of barb coming in from the Ukrainian president himself on social media. But when Prime Minister Modi went and met Mr. Zelensky, there was no such remarks coming in from Russia. So Russia has maintained its dignity when it comes to treating its allies and their opinions are concerned. So Russia has always supported India's statement that India has been calling for peace and stability, and Russia has played it quite smartly, in fact, saying that they also want stability and peace, and unless the West stops interfering in the region, there cannot be any peace. So they have actually not contradicted what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been calling all along.
Right. And Akshay, just 30 to 60 seconds, the larger message as far as both sides' opening remarks are concerned, particularly the Indian side.
Well, the larger message is absolutely clear that the two countries are independent nations. Their foreign policies are independent when it comes to the pressure that has been coming in from various aspects of the world, be it the kind of Chinese pressure that has been on Russia, given the fact that China is becoming or are they emerging as a major trade partner for China, or the Western pressure that has been on India to sort of step back from its ties from Russia is not going to work when it comes to the relationship and friendship between these two countries are concerned.
Right, with Russia acknowledging that it attaches tremendous amount of significance to India-Russia ties, as reiterated by President Putin in his brief remarks. Thank you very much, Akshay Dongre, for joining us live from Newsroom. And before we wrap up this broadcast, can we quickly have a quick remark from Mr. Bishnu if he's not there, right? Fred, you want to quickly just give some closing remarks? Quickly.
Well, I'm really optimistic about this developments. I think the world is changing under our feet very rapidly. We're living through an extraordinary moment in history, and this summit meeting is going to, it's incremental, of course, but it is really earth-shaking when you think about it.
Okay, earth-shaking. Well, that's quite incredible in terms of, Ambassador Tyal, you also find
I
it
also
earth-shaking?
look forward to this Kazan declaration which will come, and I'm sure it will have some new directions that we did not talk about it, but payments and NDB, New Development Bank, de-dollarization, and because that would perhaps be the main agenda which we will see in the declaration. But on Ukraine-Russia conflict, I'm sure there will be a lot of discussions informally and over dinner, etc., which may have a very positive bearing in the future.
Okay. On that note, thank you very much, Ambassador Tyal. As always, an honor to have you on our special shows. And Fred, it's always a pleasure to have you joining us live all the way from Moscow again. Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Okay.
And with that, let's take a short breather here. On the other side, news and updates continue on your channel, DT India, India's voice to the world. Stay with us.